It was one of those quiet Sunday mornings in our neighborhood, the kind where you expect nothing more dramatic than the sound of sprinklers turning on or someone walking their dog. I had just come back from grabbing groceries, my arms full of eggs, and in the rush to get everything inside before the ice cream melted, I didn't notice one small detail. My front door wasn't locked. Now, in most normal neighborhoods, this wouldn't be a big deal. People forget sometimes, you close it later, life goes on. But in our neighborhood, nothing slipped past Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Karen had lived across the street. For years, always with that same permanent scowl on her face, clutching her HOA clipboard like it was a royal decree. She had a reputation. Trash cans left out too long, Karen sent a notice. Lawn too long by half an inch, Karen sent pictures to the HOA board. Halloween decorations, too scary for the children, she'd say, and complain about it until you took them down. So when she walked by my house that morning and noticed my front door was unlocked, it was as though she'd struck gold. I was inside, putting away the groceries, when I caught sight of her through the window. She was standing at the end of my driveway, glaring at my house like she had just caught me committing a federal crime. Her arms were crossed, phone clutched in one hand, and she was muttering to herself. I couldn't hear her words, but I could see the smugness on her face. A minute later, she marched right up to my porch. Knock, knock, knock. The kind of knock that wasn't really a knock. It was more like a demand. I opened the door. "Morning, Karen." Her eyes darted past me, scanning the entryway like she was on a mission. "Do you realize," she said, her voice dripping with false concern, "that your front door was unlocked?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "I just got home with groceries. I hadn't locked it yet." She shook her head, clicking her tongue. "This is a safety violation. An HOA safety violation. Leaving your door unlocked invites crime. It endangers the neighborhood." I blinked. I didn't know the HOA had jurisdiction over my door locks. Karen puffed out her chest. "The HOA has jurisdiction over safety matters, and I will be filing a report." She pulled out her phone, snapping a picture of my door like it was Exhibit A in some kind of trial. I had to bite back a laugh. "Karen, it's my door, my house. If I want to leave it unlocked for 10 minutes while I put away groceries, that's my business." Her eyes narrowed. "If you won't take responsibility, then I'll make sure the authorities know." "Don't worry, I've already called the cops. They'll be here any minute." I froze. "You called the cops? On me? For my own front door?" She gave me that smug little smile. "Yes, because clearly you don't care about the safety of our community. Someone has to." My blood boiled, but before I could even respond, the faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Karen folded her arms. Satisfied. "They'll handle this. Let's see how you explain yourself to them." And in that moment, I realized this was about to become much bigger than a petty HOA complaint. Little did Karen know the officer she was waiting for was already inside my house, drinking coffee in full uniform. The sound of those sirens grew louder, echoing through the neighborhood like a drumbeat of dread. Every second, the wailing came closer, bouncing off the neat rows of identical houses. From my porch, I could see curtains shifting, blinds twitching. Our quiet cul-de-sac had suddenly come alive with nosy neighbors peeking out. Nothing brought them to the window faster than flashing lights. Karen, of course, was in her element. She stood tall on my porch like a queen awaiting her royal guards, lips curled into that self-satisfied smile. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted, attention. I stayed calm on the surface, but inside my chest my heart was pounding. Not because I was guilty. How could I be? My only crime was forgetting to lock the door. But because Karen had set this up in such a way that made me look like a criminal in my own home. The squad car turned the corner, lights flashing red and blue. The sound cut off abruptly as the vehicle rolled to a stop right in front of my driveway. The whole street seemed to hold its breath. Karen smirked. "Finally. Let's see how you talk your way out of this." I glanced back inside the house. From the kitchen doorway, I caught the faintest glimpse of my wife. She stood there silently, mug of coffee in hand, dressed casually, for now. But behind her calm eyes, I saw the flicker of amusement. She hadn't said a word yet, but we both knew how this was going to end. Two officers stepped out of the car. One was younger, maybe fresh from training, adjusting his belt nervously. The other was older, a seasoned cop with sharp eyes that immediately swept the street. Karen practically leapt off my porch, waving her arms like she was flagging down a taxi. "Officers! Officers over here!" she shouted, pointing dramatically at me like I'd been caught robbing my own home. The older cop's brows furrowed. "Ma'am, what seems to be the emergency?" Karen didn't miss a beat. "This man," she hissed, jabbing a finger at me, "left his front door unlocked, wide open, for hours. It's a hazard, a danger to the community. I demand you do something about it." The younger officer blinked, clearly confused. He looked at me, then at the door, then back at Karen. Ma'am, did you say—" "The door?" "Yes. she snapped. "The front door. Unlocked. Anyone could have walked in. A criminal. A thief. A murderer. He's putting us all at risk." The older cop exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of his nose like this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with someone like her. "Ma'am, leaving your door unlocked is not a criminal offense." Karen gasped as if he'd just committed blasphemy. "Not a criminal?" "Of course it is. It's negligence. It's reckless endangerment." I leaned casually against the door frame, watching this circus unfold. "Told you, Karen. My house. My door. Not the HOA's business." Her face flushed red. "Don't you dare talk back to me. Officers search his home. There could be squatters in there right now." The young cop shifted uncomfortably. We don't just search people's houses without probable cause, ma'am." Karen turned on him, her eyes blazing. "Probable cause? Look at him. He's smug. He's hiding something. I know it." That was my cue. I raised my voice just enough to cut through her ranting. "Officers, if you'd like to come in for a moment, you're welcome. My wife's inside." I paused deliberately, letting the suspense hang in the air. She might have something to say about this situation. Karen whipped her head toward me, eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Your wife? What does she have to do with this?" I didn't answer. I just smiled, stepping aside to hold the door open. The officers exchanged glances. The older one gave a slight shrug. It was harmless enough, and he probably just wanted to get this over with. Karen, meanwhile, practically shoved her way forward. Yes, let's ask your wife. Let's see if she approves of your reckless disregard for—" Her words cut off the moment my wife appeared in the hallway. She wasn't in casual clothes anymore. She'd slipped away when I distracted Karen, and changed. Now she stepped forward in full police uniform, badge gleaming, utility belt secure. Every inch of her radiating authority. She held her coffee mug in one hand like it was the calmest Saturday morning in the world. The silence was absolute. Even the neighbors peeking out from their windows seemed frozen in shock. Karen's jaw fell open, her face draining of color. My wife arched an eyebrow. "Is there a problem here, officers?" The older cop immediately straightened. "Officer Robinson, didn't expect to see you here." "Morning, Daniels," she replied coolly, like they were old colleagues bumping into each other at the grocery store. She turned her gaze on Karen. "And you are?" Karen stammered, her hands flapping uselessly in the air. I was just, his door." My wife sipped her coffee slowly, unbothered. "His door?" Karen swallowed. It was unlocked. Wide open, I thought. "Well, I called the police." The young cop scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. "She insisted, ma'am." My wife's lips twitched, almost into a smile. She set down her mug on the little side table by the door, then folded her arms, her badge catching the sunlight streaming through the window. "So let me get this straight," she said calmly, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "You called the police because my husband forgot to lock our front door while bringing in groceries?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. No words came out. My wife took a step closer, her boots clicking against the hardwood. "You wasted department resources. You interrupted officers who could be responding to real emergencies. All because of a door." Karen let out a weak laugh, trying to recover. "Well, I was only thinking of the community's safety. That's my job as the HOA president." "No," my wife cut in, sharp enough to slice the air. "Your job is enforcing neighborhood bylaws, not impersonating law enforcement, not wasting police time." The younger cop coughed, looking away to hide his smirk. Even the older one couldn't disguise the ghost of a grin tugging at his lips. Karen's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth again, but before she could spit out another excuse, my wife leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough that it carried across the porch with quiet authority. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop harassing my husband. You're going to stop weaponizing 911 for your personal vendettas. And you're going to walk away right now before I decide to file a report for misuse of emergency services." Karen's eyes widened in horror. For the first time, she looked small. Her gaze darted around, searching desperately for support from the neighbors who'd been watching. But all she saw were blinds snapping shut and curtains fluttering closed. No one was going to save her from this. Finally, with a strangled little noise, she spun on her heel and stormed off the porch. Her high heels clicked angrily against the pavement as she marched back across the street. The officers exchanged a look, then nodded politely to my wife. "We'll take it from here, Officer Robinson," the older one said. "Have a good day." "Thank you, Daniels." "You too," she replied, picking her coffee back up as if nothing had happened. The squad car pulled away. Karen disappeared behind her front door, and I stood there struggling not to laugh as my wife took another calm sip. She looked at me, eyes twinkling. "Next time," she said, "lock the door before Karen has a heart attack." I couldn't hold it anymore. I burst out laughing. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to give up after one humiliation. No, she'd be back. And next time she'd be even more desperate, because in Karen's world, losing once only meant plotting harder for revenge, and I had no idea what she was about to try next. For a few blessed days after the door incident, things in the neighborhood went quiet again. Too quiet. Karen hadn't marched across my lawn, hadn't slipped passive-aggressive notes under my doormat, hadn't taken pictures of my trash cans. At first I thought maybe, just maybe, my wife's uniform had finally silenced her, that maybe being humiliated in front of cops, the neighbors, and her own ego had been enough. But Karen wasn't built that way. Karen was like a storm that only calmed to gather more strength. And sure enough, the first sign of her return came one Thursday evening when a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just bold block letters across the front. Mandatory HOA board hearing. I almost laughed. Almost. But then I opened it. Inside was a neatly typed letter. Well, neatly, if you ignored the fact that the font was so bold it nearly ripped through the paper. Dear homeowner, you are hereby summoned to attend a disciplinary hearing before the HOA board on Saturday at 6 p.m. Your repeated disregard for community safety, as evidenced by your negligence to lock your door, and your disrespectful behavior toward the HOA president, myself, will be addressed. Failure to attend will result in fines and further legal action. Sincerely, Karen Smith, HOA president. I stared at the letter, then at my wife. She leaned back in her chair, sipping her tea, eyebrows raised. She actually wrote summoned, I said, holding the paper like it was radioactive. My wife smirked. Guess she didn't learn her lesson. Guess not, I muttered. Saturday came faster than I wanted. The HOA held their board meetings in the community center down the street, a bland beige building that smelled of old coffee and desperation. By the time I walked in, the room was already half full. Neighbors sat in metal folding chairs, murmuring among themselves. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. And at the front of the room sat Karen, perched on a chair behind a long folding table like she was presiding over a courtroom. To her left and right were 4 other board members, none as intense as Karen, but all looking a little too eager to flex their tiny scraps of power. As I entered, Karen's eyes lit up like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. She banged a tiny gavel against the table. Yes, she had actually brought a gavel. Order, order, she barked, though no one was talking. This disciplinary hearing is now in session. I took a seat in the front row, arms crossed. My wife sat beside me, calm and composed, her badge discreetly tucked under her jacket but present enough to gleam if the light caught it. Karen shuffled some papers dramatically. The case before us, the homeowner at 143 Sycamore Drive, who has repeatedly violated community safety codes and has shown blatant disrespect toward the governing authority of this association. Murmurs rippled through the room. One older neighbor, Mr. Thompson, whispered loudly, "What's he supposed to have done again?" Karen slammed her gavel. "He left his door unlocked." The room went silent, then erupted into awkward coughs and stifled laughs. "Unlocked?" Someone whispered. "That's it," another muttered. Karen's face turned red. "Yes, unlocked." A wide-open invitation for crime. "This is a serious infraction against our bylaws." One of the board members, Mrs. Carter, shifted uncomfortably. Karen, I don't think the bylaws specifically mention door locks." Karen shot her a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "It falls under Section 12, Clause B. All homeowners must take reasonable measures to ensure community safety." I raised my hand lazily. "Quick question. What about you trespassing on my property and taking pictures without my permission? What clause covers that?" A ripple of chuckles spread through the audience. Karen banged her gavel again, harder this time. "Silence. This is not your turn to speak." My wife leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting through the room. "Actually, as his spouse and a law enforcement officer, I'd like clarification too, because where I come from, trespassing is a criminal offense. Leaving your own door unlocked is not." All heads turned toward her. Some gasped. Others whispered. Karen froze, her eyes flicking nervously toward my wife's badge, half hidden under her jacket. This is irrelevant," Karen stammered. "We're not talking about me. We're talking about him." The older neighbor, Mr. Thompson, chuckled. "Seems like you've got a personal vendetta, Karen. Isn't this the 3rd time this month you've dragged someone in here over nonsense?" Karen's gavel wobbled in her hand as she slammed it again. "Order, order. I will not be disrespected in my own hearing." But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. They were restless, curious, even a little amused. Sensing she was losing ground, Karen leaned forward, her voice dropping into a dramatic whisper meant to sound ominous. "And if the unlocked door wasn't enough," she said, drawing it out, "there's more." The board members glanced at each other. My stomach tightened. Here it was, the real reason she'd dragged me here. Karen pulled out a stack of photos and slapped them onto the table. Blown-up color prints clearly taken with her phone. She held them up one by one like damning evidence. "This," she declared, holding up a photo of my driveway. "His trash can, left out past the designated pickup window." Gasps, though more from disbelief than horror. This. Another photo, my lawn, a few blades of grass standing taller than the rest. Grass length violation. This. She slammed down a final picture of my porch light. Non-regulation light fixture. The room broke into laughter. Actual uncontrollable laughter. Even the board members were struggling to keep straight faces. Mrs. Carter shook her head. Karen, are you serious? These aren't violations, they're normal. Karen's face twisted in fury. You're all blind, can't you see? He's undermining the entire foundation of this community. If we let him get away with this, it's chaos. Anarchy. I stood up slowly, letting the silence stretch after the laughter died down. Or maybe, I said, my voice calm, you just don't like the fact that you can't control me. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. I turned to the board. Here's what's really happening. Karen has been harassing homeowners for years, and when I stood up to her, she didn't like it. So now she's abusing her position to settle a personal score. The murmurs grew louder, agreeing with me. Neighbors nodded. The tide was shifting. And then my wife stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Authority radiated from her like a quiet storm. I'll be filing an official complaint with the city about misuse of HOA authority, she said, her tone even. This behavior isn't just the board meeting ended in chaos. By the time I walked out of the community center, the air was buzzing with laughter, whispers, and frustrated mutters. Neighbors clustered in small groups, shaking their heads and chuckling about Karen's court, as they'd already started calling it. Karen, however, didn't laugh. She stood at the front of the room, red-faced and trembling with rage, clutching her little gavel like it could restore her authority. The board members had adjourned early, muttering that they'd review procedures before the next session. Everyone knew what that meant. They were tired of her antics, too. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. As I walked back home with my wife at my side, I caught a glimpse of Karen across the street. She stood in her yard, glaring at us like a predator watching prey. Even in the dim glow of the streetlights, I could see her lips moving. She was muttering, plotting. My wife leaned close and whispered, "She's not finished." I sighed. I know. The next morning, the harassment began anew. First, it was a bright yellow violation notice taped to my door. Failure to maintain lawn. Grass exceeds maximum length of 2 inches. I crouched, measuring the grass with my fingers. It barely brushed past my knuckles. 2 inches? She must have measured this with a microscope. Later that afternoon, another notice appeared. Unauthorized vehicle parking, driveway too close to sidewalk. My truck hadn't moved in 3 days. It was parked exactly where it always was. By evening, the third notice arrived. Trash bin improper placement poses safety hazard. I hadn't even taken the bin out yet. She's just making these up now, I muttered, waving the paper at my wife. Let her dig her own grave, she said calmly. The more outrageous she gets, the easier it'll be to prove harassment. But it wasn't just the notices. Karen had upgraded her tactics. That night, I caught her standing on the sidewalk with her phone, snapping pictures of my house. The flash lit up the darkness, bright and invasive. I stepped outside. Need a better angle, Karen? I can turn on the porch light for you. She flinched but didn't back down. Evidence, she hissed. Every picture is evidence. Then she scurried off like a rat retreating to her hole. By the weekend, she escalated again. This time, she brought reinforcements. I woke up to the sound of voices outside. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Karen in my front yard. Yes, my yard, with 2 HOA board members trailing behind her. She was pointing furiously at my garden bed, gesturing like she was uncovering buried treasure. And right here, she barked, these plants are unapproved species. Violation of landscape conformity code. The board members looked uncomfortable. One of them, Mr. Alvarez, rubbed the back of his neck. Karen, those are just rose bushes. Half the street has them. Karen's eyes bulged. They're illegal. I checked the guidelines. My patience snapped. I flung the door open and stormed onto the porch. Get off my property, now. Karen whirled toward me, her face twisted in triumph. See, hostile behavior. Intimidation. This man is a menace. Mr. Alvarez sighed. Karen, this is ridiculous. We can't just... But Karen cut him off. If the board won't act, then I will. I've already contacted the city code enforcement office. They'll be here any day now. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. She was dragging in outside authorities, hoping to bury me in red tape and fines. My wife stepped out beside me. Uniform shirt on this time, her badge clipped plainly at her belt. Her presence alone shifted the air. Karen, she said firmly, you're on private property. Step off or I'll document this as trespassing. For a moment, Karen faltered. But then she puffed up her chest and hissed, you think you're untouchable because of that badge? You're not. Nobody is above the HOA. The board members exchanged looks. Even they were starting to see the cracks in her crusade. Karen finally stormed off, dragging them with her, but not before throwing one last glare over her shoulder. You'll regret this, she spat. The following days were like living under siege. Karen flooded my mailbox with violation letters. She filed petty complaints with the city. She even went door to door, trying to rally neighbors against me. But something unexpected happened. Instead of siding with her, the neighbors started siding with me. One by one, they stopped me in the street, shaking their heads. She tried the same thing with me last year, Mrs. Patel admitted. Told me my shutters were the wrong shade of blue. I had to pay for a correction that wasn't even in the bylaws. She fined me for having my nephew's car in the driveway overnight, Mr. Thompson added. Said it was a violation. I checked. There's no such rule. It was like a dam breaking. Everyone had a Karen story. And now, with her targeting me so publicly, they finally had someone to rally behind. My wife was right. Karen was digging her own grave. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Because if there was one thing I'd learned about Karen, it was this. When she lost control, she didn't retreat. She doubled down. And the look in her eyes that morning, wild, desperate, cornered, told me she was planning something big. Something that could make the unlocked door look like child's play. I didn't know it yet. But Karen's next move would drag lawyers, city officials, and the entire neighborhood into a battle that could decide who really ruled our community. Thought Karen's harassment had peaked with the endless violation notices and her late-night evidence-gathering missions. But then, one Monday morning, I opened my mailbox to find an official-looking envelope stamped with the seal of city code enforcement. My stomach sank. Inside was a letter that read like a laundry list of supposed violations. Improper lawn maintenance. Unauthorized exterior fixtures, unsafe trash storage, and of course the infamous unlocked door, rebranded as negligent property security. Every accusation mirrored Karen's complaints. It was clear she'd filed them with the city, dressing up her petty grievances in official language. I set the letter on the kitchen table and rubbed my temples. She actually did it. She dragged the city into this. My wife picked up the letter, scanning it with sharp eyes. A slow smile crept across her face. Good, she just made her biggest mistake yet. I frowned. How's this good? Because city officials don't play games, she replied. They'll see right through her lies, and when they do, her credibility will be shredded. The inspection was scheduled for Friday morning. When the city code officer arrived, Karen was already waiting in my front yard, clipboard in hand, practically bouncing with excitement. She greeted the officer like they were old friends, immediately launching into a tirade about my lawless property. And over there, she pointed dramatically at my perfectly trimmed bushes. Those are unauthorized species. And his driveway? A clear hazard. The whole community's safety is at stake. The officer, a weary-looking man named Mr. Daniels, listened patiently but scribbled nothing. He turned to me. Mind if I take a look around? Go ahead, I said, stepping aside. Karen followed like a shadow, narrating every blade of grass. See, right here. The lawn exceeds regulation height. And that light fixture, non-compliant. Oh, and the trash bin placement, unsafe proximity to walkway. Daniels knelt by the grass, measuring with a small ruler. He raised an eyebrow. 2 inches exactly. Within code, Karen's smile faltered. But he moved to the bushes. Roses, common, no violation, her voice cracked. But those shutters, the color, it's not approved. Daniels checked his clipboard. Actually, this shade is listed as approved. No violation. Each declaration was like a hammer blow. Karen's face grew paler with every word. Finally, Daniels turned back to me. Mr. Robinson, your property is in compliance. No citations will be issued. Karen's mouth dropped open. No citations, none? But his door, Daniels frowned. Leaving your own door unlocked isn't a code violation. Ma'am, filing false or exaggerated complaints wastes city resources. Consider this your warning. He handed me a copy of the inspection report, stamped clear, and walked back to his car. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard trembling in her hands. My wife stepped forward, her voice calm but lethal. That's twice now, Karen, once with the police, now with the city. Keep this up and the next authority you'll answer to is a judge. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she looked less like a tyrant and more like a cornered animal. But I knew her well enough to realize this wasn't the end. Not yet. Sure enough, 2 days later, another letter arrived. Not from the city this time. From the HOA itself. Special meeting, vote to remove non-compliant homeowner. My blood boiled. She's calling a vote to kick us out. My wife leaned over my shoulder, reading. No, she's calling a vote to kick herself out. I blinked. What? She doesn't realize how many people she's alienated, she said, smirking. This meeting won't go how she thinks it will. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. More neighbors showed up than I'd ever seen at an HOA session before. The air buzzed with tension, whispers darting through the room like sparks. Karen sat at the front table, gavel in hand, posture rigid. She launched into a fiery speech, her words dripping with venom. This homeowner has repeatedly defied the rules, disrespected this board, and endangered our community. Tonight we vote to remove him, and restore order to our neighborhood. But instead of applause, silence greeted her. Cold, heavy silence. Then Mr. Thompson stood up from the back row. Actually, I think we should vote on something else. Karen blinked. What? No, that's not on the agenda. Mrs. Patel rose beside him. We've all been dealing with your harassment for years, Karen. Enough is enough. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. One by one, neighbors stood, their voices growing louder. You fined me for leaving my bike on the porch. You threatened to tow my car. You said my Christmas lights were offensive. Each accusation piled higher, until Karen was drowning in them. She slammed her gavel desperately, shouting for order, but no one listened. Finally, Mr. Alvarez, one of the board members, stood and raised his hand. I motioned to remove Karen Smith as HOA president effective immediately. The room erupted in cheers. Hands shot into the air. Nearly unanimous. Karen's face turned crimson, her mouth opening and closing in shock. You can't. I'm the president! I am the HOA. But it was too late. The vote was counted, the motion passed, and just like that, Karen was dethroned. She stormed out of the community center, her gavel clutched like a lifeline, eyes wild with fury. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But deep down I knew this wasn't over, because people like Karen didn't just fade away quietly. They plotted. They schemed. And the look she gave me as she slammed the door behind her sent a chill down my spine. Karen had lost the board, the city, and the neighborhood, but she wasn't finished. Her final act of revenge was still to come, and it would strike where I least expected it. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt free. After Karen's dramatic downfall at the HOA meeting, people started smiling more, waving to each other, even chatting on the sidewalks. It was like a cloud had lifted. Kids rode their bikes without being scolded. Holiday decorations went up early. Trash cans lingered at the curb without mysterious warning letters appearing. But I couldn't relax. Not yet. But the answer came soon enough in the form of a thick, ominous envelope delivered by certified mail. Notice of intent to file lawsuit. Karen was suing us. The claims were wild. Emotional distress, harassment, slander, damages to her reputation as HOA president. She even demanded compensation for the psychological trauma of being humiliated in public by my wife's badge. I stared at the pages, dumbfounded. This is insane. She's suing us for embarrassing herself. My wife skimmed the documents, shaking her head. It's baseless. Any judge will toss this out in seconds. But Karen had finally played her most dangerous card. Not the HOA, not the city, but the legal system. And even baseless lawsuits could drain time, energy, and money. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the county courthouse. I didn't want to go. Every part of me wanted to laugh it off, to ignore it. But my wife insisted. We face this head on. If we don't, she'll spin it as a victory. So we went. Karen arrived early, dressed in a stiff navy suit, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She clutched a thick binder stuffed with evidence, pictures of my lawn, trash bins, the infamous door. She looked around the courtroom with that smug expression, convinced the law itself was on her side. When the judge entered, we all rose. The proceedings began. Karen launched into a passionate speech, voice trembling with righteous fury. Your Honor, she declared, this man and his wife have systematically destroyed my authority, disrespected our community, and subjected me to unimaginable emotional harm. I was only trying to uphold order. Instead, I was mocked, humiliated, and dethroned. My reputation is ruined because of them. She slapped down her photos like they were damning exhibits. Look, the unlocked door, the trash cans, the non-regulation light fixture. Proof of his defiance. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, peered over her glasses. Mrs. Smith, am I correct in understanding that your complaint stems from a neighbor leaving his front door unlocked? Karen flushed. It's more than that. It's a pattern of defiance, a danger to the community. He mocks authority, and his wife weaponizes her badge to intimidate me. My wife stood slowly, calm, professional, badge glinting at her belt. With respect, Your Honor, she said evenly. The only intimidation that occurred here was Ms. Smith calling the police and city officials for fabricated violations. She trespassed on our property, harassed us with dozens of false notices, and misused emergency services. I have official reports documenting each incident. She handed the judge a neatly organized folder, pages of police reports, city inspection findings, even statements from neighbors. The contrast was stark. Karen's binder full of exaggerated photos versus our calm factual documentation. The judge flipped through both. The silence stretched. Finally, she set the papers down and looked directly at Karen. Ms. Smith, the judge said slowly, this is not a court of petty grievances. You have wasted the court's time with frivolous claims. Not only am I dismissing your case, but I am also considering sanctions for misuse of the legal system. Karen's face collapsed. Sanctions. But, the gavel came down. Case dismissed. It was over in minutes. Karen staggered out of the courtroom, pale and trembling, clutching her useless binder like it could still save her. For the first time she looked broken. Aunt neighbors later said she stopped showing up at community events. The endless violation notices vanished. The clipboard disappeared. Slowly, almost quietly, Karen faded from power. A month later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. By spring, her house stood empty. Life in the neighborhood transformed. The new HOA president was fair, reasonable, and focused on actual improvements. Fixing the pool, resurfacing the tennis courts, organizing holiday parties. People laughed about the reign of Karen like it was a bad dream finally ended. One evening, sitting on the porch with my wife, I asked, "Do you think we've really seen the last of her?" She sipped her coffee, smiling faintly. People like Karen never truly disappear. But this time, she went too far. The law itself shut her down. She won't risk that again. I looked at our quiet street, the kids playing, the neighbors waving, the peace restored, and for the first time in months, I believed it. Karen had fought to control the neighborhood, to control us. But in the end, her obsession had destroyed her instead. And yet every time I pass that empty house with the for sale sign, I can't help but wonder what kind of chaos she's spreading in the next neighborhood unlucky enough to have her.